This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
On the phone with us, Chris Burke, The Athletic. Second day of training camp, got a chance to go out there the first 2 days. And I think a lot of the talk has been in regards to Patricia's second season, how the changes could potentially affect the team. What has been your impression of the first 2 days of training camp where the majority of the practices, no pads?
I mean, I think, I don't want to jump to any conclusions on it. I think it looks looser. I mean, I think the players look more relaxed, and Patricia spoke about it before the practice on Friday, that second practice. He said the guys they really know what they have to do to go from drill to drill and how to get into things now, so they don't have to stop and explain everything. And I think you can see that it looks smoother. I also, maybe they'll get into this later in camp, but I definitely remember that pretty much every practice last year ended with 10, 15 minutes of really hard conditioning. And it seems like that's maybe more built into the practice now. So it's still early there. Obviously, most of it's still just in shells and shorts and everything. Haven't had a full padded practice yet. So I'm sure the intensity is going to ramp up. But I do think you notice that things look smoother. The players look like they're in better moods coming off the field. So, I think from that perspective, it's been a good sign so far.
The key for this season for Matt Patricia and the players is really getting off to a good start. Like they say, after every practice, they want to get better each and every day. And right now, it's early in training camp. What kind of storylines and what are you looking for early on when you're out there and observing what's going on at practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just sort of look at, first of all, just what we were talking about, how this practice is running. Does it look like he's in better control now? I think you're trying to get some feel for what this offense and what this defense is going to look like. And I think that you get some of those glimpses. I mean, there's definitely a lot of guys on that offense that can make plays, and they've had some opportunities to sort of spread the field. We've seen them go, into 4 and 5 wide sets and take the running backs and put them out by the sideline and run 2 tight ends in the slot. And I mean, they've done a bunch of different things already that sort of give you a hint that they could be wide open if they want to be on offense. And I think defensively, you're seeing, Jelani Tavai looks like he's going to be an important addition for them. Haven't really seen Trey Flowers yet, but certainly the versatility on the defense is pretty obvious in that front seven. So those are kind of the bigger things. And then you just sort of go down position by position. The tight ends are obviously jumping out so far. I think everyone's kind of been talking about them through the first 2 days. And again, I think that's a great sign. If those tight ends are as good as it looks like they could be, I mean, that opens up that offense in just a entirely different way of that, because that was never ever part of the equation last year for them.
What has impressed people too is potentially the plethora of options that Matthew Stafford could have with that offense if it does get into gear. Having options is always a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think we haven't even really seen Jesse James do that much through 2 days as a pass catcher. Most of the throws to the tight ends, Hawkinson's had several impressive catches. Logan Thomas looks pretty good. I think Isaac Nada had a good day Friday, so that's already 4 deep at tight end. And then you'd go to the running backs, and we know Kerryon Johnson can catch. We've seen Ty Johnson make a couple plays. Nick Bowden had one coming out of the backfield. So yeah, I mean, that's 7, 8 names before we even get to the guys that are probably going to be the main targets, which are Galladay, Jones, and Amendola. And so if you're talking about being that deep at wide receiver, tight end, running back, you just for their sake, you hope that they take advantage of it. You don't want to be run, and then throw 4 guys out there in 3rd and 9 every time. You want to see them open it up and really play with these weapons they've got.
No doubt about it. I think that is the biggest question mark is going into training camp. How are the players and that offense going to take shape, especially with a new offensive coordinator, Darrell Bevell?
Yeah, and I think, again, it's really early, so it's hard to get a sense for exactly what it's going to be like. But again, I do think that they've shown some potential for really spreading the field and sort of attacking sideline to sideline. We know that they can take those deep shots. I think something we have seen in the first 2 days is really Stafford's been under center quite a bit, which is, they did that in the old offense, and they certainly worked on it in camp. But it looks like it's going to be a bigger piece to this offense, is getting him under center, rolling him out from there, and seeing what they can take advantage of. But yeah, I mean, the goal always for any offense is to either hit those big plays over the top or get guys into space that can catch and run. They didn't really do either of those things, but this offense this year, I think, has a chance to really get those guys to where they're catching, being able to turn up field and make something happen. And Again, it's just been 2 days without pads on, but I think you see sort of those elements kind of built in where Stafford doesn't necessarily have to throw passes into coverage all the time. I think there's going to be a lot of those, 3 and 4 yard passes that last year went for 3 and 4 yard gains, and this year maybe you can turn them into something more because of the weapons you've got.
One of the benefits to the Detroit Lions starting training camp has been the fact that, no holdouts. Darius Slay, Damon Harrison, they have reported they didn't practice the first day, but I think it set a good tone that, hey, they did show up. Now, after the first training camp practice, Darius Slay did address the media and kind of, deflected a little bit in terms of maybe why he didn't hold out and why he did show up, but he did kind of make note and really indicate that he feels like, everybody is aware that potentially he's underpaid. So it did spark a little bit of a debate. Where did you stand on Darius Slay's situation, and do you believe at the end when it shakes out he's going to play under the current deal that he has?
I think he probably will. I mean, it was always going to be tough to get a new deal just because the Lions really don't do this 2 years out with a guy having 2 years left on his deal. And then at the same time, I think you can understand it from the other side. Just if you look at the totality of his contract, Slay is underpaid. Harrison's underpaid. Harrison doesn't have any guaranteed money left. So, that's always something that sort of catches players' eyes when a team can bail on them without taking any cap hit. So, I think, to me, the sort of semi-holdouts and the fact that Slay, was so vocal on social media about wanting a new deal, it strikes me almost as like a warning shot, so to speak. Like, maybe we don't need to take care of this now. I'll come play now. I'll be at camp. We'll go into the season. We'll try to have a good year. But if we don't get this taken care of, this is something that's going to come back around. And so if it's still lingering next year, then you probably will see a holdout, I think, at that point, because they'll have 1 year left on the deal. So, but yeah, like you said, it's great news for them to have those guys in camp. I think it'll be even better when they actually get them, off the NFI list and get them worked in to the reps, because they're starting to look a little thin defensively just between the guys that are out and, a couple injury tweaks here and there. And you'd like to see what this defense is going to look like when the regular season comes around. But, it's a huge headache off their plate to have those guys there.
Yeah, now by all accounts, many people view the defense to be the strength of the team. Obviously, Matt Patricia, being a defensive coordinator, having experience, won the Super Bowl. What position group do you feel like on the defensive side has the most question marks, especially with the fact that early on there's been some injuries at linebacker? Saw some early today on Friday in terms of linebackers leaving the field and things like that. Obviously, Glover Quinn, a solid leader, no longer part of the organization. What position group do you think has the most question marks on that defense?
I still think it's cornerback, just because I'm not sure what that number 2 cornerback job is going to look like. I mean, I think we've seen, going back to the spring, Tease Tabor, Rashawn Melvin really are the 2 guys there. And I think if they were playing this week, it probably would be Melvin, just because he's got a more, tangible, legitimate experience than Tease Tabor had. Maybe they slide Justin Coleman out there and play him a little bit on the outside. But that's still the big one. You sort of still circle that and say, all right, this could be a trouble spot if they can't get it figured out. I think the defensive line, when everyone's healthy, is going to be the strength of that group. Linebackers still a bit of a question mark to me too, just because, looking at them through 2 days, trying to get a sense for how they're going to use Jared Davis and Jelani Tavai. And then, Christian Jones was one of those guys who left early with what looked like a minor injury on Friday. But that's still a spot where the depth maybe is a bit of a concern, depending on how some of those guys come along. I think they are putting a ton on Tavai's plate, and they really are going to expect him to be a big piece. So if that doesn't work out, or if that, second, third edge rusher doesn't develop and show up, then that's another spot where they could have some problems. But really, for me, it's that second cornerback job right now.
A key addition in free agency, a guy that, by all accounts, will be a guy that instills leadership and is a Matt Patricia guy, will be Trey Flowers. For those that don't know, what will he bring to the table? What are the Detroit Lions going to be expecting from him when he does get back on the field?
Yeah, well, you mentioned one of the big ones is that he knows Matt Patricia. He knows this defense, so he's just been working off to the side right now, and I don't think that's a huge deal because he's aware of what it takes to play in this defense. He knows the reads and the scheme, and so you can just sort of, assuming the conditioning's up, you can kind of just drop him right in there and expect him to hit the ground running. But, I think the 2 big things are both things that Matt Patricia wants and we're kind of missing last year, which is, one, he's a guy who can get to the quarterback off the edge, which they were sort of touch and go on last year. But I think the biggest thing is probably that he's not just a pure edge guy. He's someone that, like a lot of the other pieces in that front seven, sometimes you'll see him rush off the edge. Sometimes he'll play as 3-tech. He's going to move around a ton and sort of let you mix and match up front. And I think they've got some guys, especially in Flowers and Deshaun Hand, who really sort of open things up. Maybe they play some 2-down lineman sets, 3-down lineman sets. I think they've got a lot of ways they can go, and that's a huge element of the Patricia scheme. It's just, it's not a 4-3 base defense. There aren't a lot of teams that just line up in one set anymore and play, but this one in particular, he wants to bring a lot of different looks. And, last year they were in a spot where they just didn't have guys who could handle those roles. So Flowers is a huge, huge upgrade in terms of someone who's going to be on the field really the majority of the snaps.
Enjoying the conversation with Chris Burke. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Chris Burke NFL, and make sure if you're not subscribed to The Athletic, please hurry up, sign up. Great deal. It's really worth your while. I get a chance to browse the newspapers and The Athletic every single day. It really does put you in the know, where even a guy like myself can go out to training camp and ask relevant questions because of great work of writers like Chris Burke. I have now been out to training camp my first 2 days, and obviously being a fan of the NFL and observing other training camps as well. Now, some people in the media today have kind of observed too that kind of the fan reaction has been a little bit subdued, and they kind of observe and compare to other camps that open, and it's kind of more like a party scene. Are you concerned at all a little bit regarding the fan interaction and the kind of little bit lackluster passion so far that we've seen the first 2 days? Is that usually the case? It picks up a little bit as training camp progresses?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily anything to be concerned about. I mean, it's no secret that this fan base is pretty rabid once the season gets going. And I think, it's been Thursday, Friday. I think they'll have bigger crowds on the weekend. I'm sure people are, if they're going to take a day or two off work to come, are probably waiting for the Patriots to be in town. I'm sure the crowds, when they do those joint practices, are going to be big. So, I don't think it's anything huge. I mean, just in general, like that Allen Park setup is a little tough to sort of drum up you don't, like you said, you see some of these other clips from other training camps and, the crowds are a little more into it and it is a little rowdier. I think it's just the way that, there's not a whole lot of space at Allen Park for where they can set up the fans and where they can, have people watching practices, especially because they have 2 fields there. There's just not a whole lot of room for fans to really get in the mix and watch. And I think also, today they break up the practice into, it was, 18, 19 sections, and only a handful of them are, 7-on-7 or a full team 11-on-11 where, you're really going to have some of those plays that get the crowd going anyway. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything to be concerned about there. I just think that's some of that just comes with the territory of Allen Park. It's just kind of how it's always been there, I think.
Now, I'll get you out of here on this. Obviously, in the NFL, a lot of people write predictions and they kind of give their early thoughts regarding what could happen. And obviously, you hear it. A lot of the questions to the players are in regards to some of the lower expectations as we've started training camp. Some writers have the Lions winning 3 to anywhere from 3 to 6 games. And so, obviously, the response is going to be that they don't pay attention to that. Do you think that's fair in terms of what you've observed with the Detroit Lions? Because I think when you realistically look at the upgrades and what the Detroit Lions have, especially with Matthew Stafford, emerging veterans that could do some things, I think the fairest point to start with any team, and especially with this team, is around 8-8. I thought some of the 3 to 4 win predictions were a little bit out there, but they're putting them out there. What do you make of it?
I think the only way they go 3-13 is if Stafford gets hurt early in the year, and then you could see things unraveling like that. I mean, if he's healthy, this is not a 3-13 team, and I've said it whenever people have asked me on Twitter, whenever we've done Q&As or something on our site. Like, I think this is a team that the upside, you could pretty clearly see this team being a 10-6 team and pushing for a wild card, maybe hanging in there in the NFC North, because they have that defense has a chance to be really, really good, especially up front. And if the offense, again, it's still so early, but the offense looks like it could be a top 10, top 12 offense. And if you finish top 10 in offense and they're a top 10 defensive unit like they were against the run, at least towards the end of last year, that's a playoff team. So, a lot of things have to go right here and there. It's a tough schedule. Again, I think they're still building up kind of what their meaningful depth is at a few positions. But, yeah, I think this is certainly the baseline for me is closer to 7-9, 8-8 than it would be a 3-13. And yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if they go 10-6 or 11-5. I wouldn't be stunned if they finish 6-10 again, but I think that's more of a fair range than, I mean, I can't imagine that they're going to be one of the worst teams in football this year. I just don't see it given what they've been the last couple of years and where they've gotten better.
Chris Burke, the Athletic beat writer for the Detroit Lions. Follow him on Twitter at Chris Burke NFL. Make sure you go out there and subscribe to the Athletic. Well worth your dollars. Chris, thank you so much. It makes it fun to go out there and see familiar faces, get to meet you, and get a chance in the future to talk football. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been good to see you out there. Thanks for reaching out.
No doubt. We'll talk soon.